Century 14 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
So I want you to imagine that your little sister or your daughter or your mom, someone like that, is driving down the road in an isolated part of Virginia, and it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. They're coming back from a party, and out of nowhere, someone crashes into them, forcing them basically off the road. They spin out of control, kind of stunned. They're out on a little embankment shoulder area. They get out of the car to go look at what happened, not really knowing what hit them. And some dude comes up behind them and grabs her, takes her into the woods, and sexually assaults her over the course of about 2 hours. That happened to a now 25-year-old female victim back in, it was Halloween 2016, like I said, after a party, early morning hours. The guy was just recently sentenced to 2 life sentences plus, I don't know, 2 life sentences plus 60 years is what it was. We'll put a link to this article in the show notes, but we're going to talk about ambush and counter ambush tactics and how they can apply to situations like this. There's a couple of characteristics that we see in this case and we see in lots of types of ambushes that we've got to think about if we're going to call something an ambush or not, because we think it's kind of a term that's overused a little bit. One of them is some kind of physical entrapment or isolation. In this case, obviously, she's out in an isolated area, and she gets rammed off the road, and so she's being isolated and kind of trapped in some way, right? And along those lines is also the sense of initiative. This kind of attack, an ambush-style attack, is difficult to avoid because surprise is a factor. And there's usually some element of overwhelming force. The whole point of it is to catch you off guard and be difficult to overcome. So Jim is going to cover with us in layman's terms what the kind of formal military definition is.
All right, so the Army has a definition. They get a lot of terms, but it's the Army, so they want to make it complicated, but also simple, but also complicated. So the definition is pretty straightforward. It's a sudden surprise attack from concealment on a mobile target. And then they've got some categories to help kind of divide them up further. They divide them up into hasty and planned. They divide up the geometry. Usually you see an L shape or a linear, and near and far, and a couple other categories. The thing about ambushes, just to kind of jump on the original opening, is they're popular because they work. And they're popular among criminals and special operations forces for the same reasons. They give the attacker, who might be at a disadvantage otherwise, some overmatch. Now, going back to that initial definition, the Army definition about sudden surprise attack from concealment on a mobile target, I have my own little tweak on that, because I think there needs to be an element of being trapped, just like Mike said, in that position of disadvantage. And we'll talk more about that in a bit, but understand the definition matters, and then in most cases, you're going to be stuck. And getting yourself unstuck is a big part of the counter tactic, right?
And this is part of the nuance to it, because the flip side of this is some ambushes are better than others. So like Jim talked about, in the definition, there's a distinction between deliberate and hasty. So if I'm planning a deliberate ambush, then I'm going to probably have a much better plan together. I'm going to do a much better job of physically trying to pin down my enemy. If, on the other hand, I see a target of opportunity, I see an enemy patrol or something walking by and they haven't seen me yet, I'm undetected, and now I see that, hey, they're going to end up in this area that's going to give me a good opportunity to launch an attack. I might have just enough time to take the initiative and set up something hasty. That might not actually physically trap them, but it might channel them into an area that is at least a little bit more difficult for them to deal with Or if nothing else, even if they're not trapped, I can at least predict exactly where they're going to be and catch them off guard.
And to even understand they might escape, but at least I got to screw with them, in a time and a place where I had the advantages, right?
Exactly.
So the classic examples from the movie Clear and Present Danger. This is actually textbook. You see it in military training. You see it in other agency training. This one scene in Clear and Present Danger, we'll link to it in the show notes. But if you remember it, presumably you've seen it, there's this convoy of American officials in Suburbans. They're blocked into an alley in Colombia, and the cartel lights them up from the rooftops. And first off, they're blocked into that alley, and the bad guys are up on the rooftop, so they've got the high ground, right? And they have the ability to move, but the guys on the ground don't.
Yeah, it's a good scene. You should probably check it out. So defining this problem is important because we want to make sure that we have a distinction if we're talking about tactics and counter tactics, right? Attacks can take different forms. One of the common things that we see, for example, is that a lot of the police shootings where officers get killed are categorized as ambushes. And I guess, I suppose you could take the broadly, applied definition, but I think usually we're overusing that term. And if we're using the wrong term for it, it makes it difficult to understand what to do about them and how to cope with them. Now, I'm sure I just pissed off a bunch of people who know a cop who got ambushed or killed one of their buddies or something. And, if you're going to take that hill and insist that it's called an ambush, then fine, go ahead. We can call it an ambush if it makes you feel better. But we're getting into the semantics a little bit. But what I want you to think about is if we're looking at ambush tactics, that only matters to us in terms of counter tactics and what we can do about it.
And it's hard to build a counter tactic against a tactic that isn't actually being used. Now, the Army's response to ambush, their counter tactic is a checklist, and it looks sort of like this: immediately return fire, occupy cover, move out of the kill zone, find the bad guys, close on them, fire a maneuver to destroy them. So if your counter tactics aren't going to fix your problem, then calling it an ambush doesn't help.
And that's sort of the paradox, because if the definition kind of fits and kind of doesn't fit, then what difference does it make what we call it? I think we can make a good case that whether the definition loosely fits or not only matters if one of your counter tactics apply. Because we have to remember that we can talk about a dozen different ambushes in this podcast episode. You can read up on a dozen different case studies, or you can look at the Army manuals and you can look at their diagrams and pictures of what an ambush is supposed to look like by textbook. But the next one that you see, and more importantly, the one that you're going to be involved with potentially, is going to look a little bit different. So you want to categorize this in terms of what are my options in this situation? And if you recognize it as, well, of my counter ambush tactics, these are my basic three options, one of those fits, then yeah, let's go ahead and call it an ambush and run with it.
Yeah. So if a guy walks into a police station and shoots the place up, I don't call that an ambush. At least it shouldn't be. The cops should own that space. He should be walking into the cops' kill zone.
That's my ex.
Yeah, that's your ex. If a guy walks up behind a parked police car and shoots at a cop, that's only kind of an ambush. Yeah, it's a surprise attack on a mobile target. Great. The key question is, do those counter tactics apply? Well, kinda. The same way that move and respond with violence applies to basically every violent encounter ever, right?
And that's the thing, is you can call an attack, or an ambush an attack, or an ambush an ambush. It's kind of the same but different. So I guess the point that we're trying to make with this is don't get too wrapped up in the definitions. What we want to do is recognize different styles of attacks and what are our options for dealing with them. So we're going to talk about a couple civilian case studies. And there's lots of law enforcement examples of this that we could go down the rabbit hole and look at, but I think they pretty well also apply to civilian stuff, and we're trying to make it relatable so that anyone listening to this can get something out of it. So we're going to look at a couple civilian cases, and I want to, before I get into those, I want to give a quick shout out to John Correa at Active Self-Protection. I reached out to him and asked him if he had any good examples off the top of his head, and he sent me a list of several, and most of them are in here. In the show notes, if you actually go and check out the YouTube links in the show notes, you'll see his breakdowns of a lot of these incidents and the video footage. So we appreciate his help with that, and you should check out his videos. They're pretty spot on in terms of the debrief and the learning points. So understand that we're not necessarily going to look at all these and call them classic ambush examples. We're going to look into it in terms of the specific characteristics. We're going to try to pin some of those down and what the counter tactics are for those things, because no matter what we call it, like I said, the reality is this sort of thing gets a lot of lip service. Just as an example, a lot of people talk about varying their routes. You want to be unpredictable and not be on the same route on the way home to and from work or whatever. And obviously for deployed service members, that's straightforward. But
I will tell you, as a previously deployed service member, even we pay lip service to it, because varying routes and times is hard. It is hard to get off your own routine.
Yeah. And even, police officers or citizens who are pretty serious about being targeted, we'll talk a good game about it, about not taking the same route home every day and stuff. But how many people really do it? And again, I'd be lying if I told you that I did it. So we can pay a lot of lip service to it. We can talk about the theoretical stuff, but let's try to be practical in how we're actually going to respond to those things. And to be clear, we're not making the assertion that, the key to your survival is going to be, should you vary your route or not? Okay. Like I said, I don't do it. We talk about it, but what we're trying to say is we need to do something more than just talk about it. The debate isn't really, is this an ambush or not? It's what can I do if X, Y, or Z happens, right? So the first case study, and I'm not really going to get into the specifics of the case study. I'm going to let John's videos cover that stuff if you guys want to check those out. Just think about the classic example that you could see in any situation. So like in this case, we're going to talk about an armed robbery. So picture a cell phone store where you've got a clerk behind the counter and two guys walk in and they're going to rob the store at gunpoint, right? Not necessarily an ambush per se, but look at these characteristics, okay? The store clerk is going to be stuck behind the counter, and these two guys walk in. So she's physically blocked in behind the counter. She's stuck there. She can't get out, right? So they have a kill zone, or they have an X, right? And this attack is generally going to be carried out by surprise. They're not coming from a position of concealment, or they're not lying in wait, but if you think about the position that clerk is in, she's sitting there in the store, people are coming in and out. They're kind of hiding in plain sight, right?
Their intent is concealed.
Right, exactly. So they're not necessarily in the classic sense of a position of concealment or lying in wait. However, they're hiding in plain sight. So this is an important distinction too, is that their intent is to steal stuff and not destroy you, like some ambushes might be.
So note here the disadvantages that are in play, right? The victim's stuck in a position of disadvantage. Consider what those specific disadvantages are, because those are the ones you have to overcome if you are the victim. First off, it's 2 against 1, right? Outnumbered. The victim's stuck. They have initiative. The victim doesn't. And is the victim armed? Almost never, right? In a cell phone store, usually I wouldn't expect the victim to be armed.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the hood you might have a couple that are hardcore. But
there have been some good videos lately, but
there have been. Yeah, I probably wouldn't go rob a cell phone store in Texas or anything, but
nope.
For example, in this case, I do not believe that she was armed, or at least if she was, she didn't launch a counterattack. So you might not know what their intentions are, but something to consider is that some ambushes are designed to find and kill the bad guy or find and kill you. And some are just a setup for a different motive, like they're trying to steal your stuff, or maybe they're trying to kidnap you, or maybe it's to arrest or capture somebody. Those things can shape a little bit how we respond to it, because there's a time and a place where, giving up or giving in might be the best option. Let's say in a robbery, for example, your stuff isn't that important. Your employer's stuff isn't that important. Their money or their cell phones, not that big of a deal, not worth anyone getting killed over, perhaps, right? In an arrest situation where, let's just say that I'm setting you up in some kind of ambush that's intended to apprehend you and you're a bad guy, my recommendation is to go ahead and give up, or actually, if you want to go ahead and run, that's cool too. My dog is going to have a great time.
Whee!
But if you're a good guy or someone is trying to kidnap you, then my advice would be to never allow yourself to be taken to a secondary location. So you have to make a little bit of an assessment when this is happening and say, well, what are my options here? if giving up or giving in is viable and you want to, roll those dice, then go with it. But just understand that there's some leeway there for, is that a good idea or not? If it's potentially a kidnapping, I would say not. If it's just a robbery, well, maybe, especially if you're unarmed, you might not really have any choice, right? So this idea of physical entrapment or some form of isolation is a key thing to look for. In this case, it's being stuck behind the counter. And I think, Jim, you had an example of this, like your classic ambush class.
Yeah, this is my classic generic ambush, and when I've tried to teach this at various times, I've noticed that people kind of have this picture in their head. They have their picture in their head of Fallujah or Vietnam, whatever movie they saw, and I always try to broaden it out. So I try to start with something everybody's familiar with. So I want you to picture your sister, your girlfriend, or your mom, probably your mom, because she and I, we go way back, and they're walking across. They're walking across, Target or Walmart, whatever your favorite store is, after sundown. It's not real late at night. It's just, the sun's gone down. And she's pushing a cart and probably texting somebody. And from behind, a dude comes up and shoves her in between two cars. And a second guy approaches from the other side of those two cars. So she's trapped. She's probably stunned by that initial shove. Now, maybe they want her purse. Maybe they want to mangle her for sport. She doesn't know. What are her options here? Well, just like Mike said, she can throw up her hands and hope that they're benevolent. Okay, I don't love that plan.
Nope.
Maybe she can pull the .44 Magnum out of her purse and blast them and walk over their dead bodies on the way out. Maybe she can blow a rape whistle or call 911, and hopefully the people of Target will come save her. So what this gets you is the three basic options. The three basic options in any ambush are get off the X, respond with overwhelming force, or get help from outside. You got to do one of those three, and you got to do it quickly.
Jim, back in when we did I think it was episode 6, we talked about road rage, and you talked about your buddy got blocked in. There's they were road raging with some dude in a parking spot, and he pinned him in with his car, right?
Yes.
So think about the difference, overseas in Iraq or Afghanistan. You might have seen insurgents might have, hit the front car in a convoy with an IED and disabled it, and they're stuck in a tight alley. And now everyone behind them now can't get out. They used the first car to block them.
Or they'll put something that might be an IED, like a bag of trash that everyone's going to stop for, right?
Yeah.
And then they can light them up with the real ones. So anyone who's real familiar with ambush and counter ambush doesn't like to stop. They don't like to stop for anything to the extent that they're willing to ram the car in front of them. They're willing to run over the bag of trash and take their chances with it, whatever. But we don't like being blocked in. So the key counter tactic is avoidance, right? Now, to make an ambush work, you've got to be set up where you know the victim's going to be. You can do that by channeling them. You can block off their exits and their escape routes. You can force them down one path to one bullseye, or the X that you've got painted on the ground. But even better, let them channel themselves. Humans are funny critters, and we tend to be strikingly predictable in our routines. Most people wake up about the same time every day. They do the same shower and shave routine. They hit the road at the same time. The Al-Qaeda guys screw their goats at the same time. I've seen it. They drive to work on the same route. They lather, rinse, and repeat. So once you know someone's pattern of life, you've got them. They've already channelized themselves. You can set up a trap for them anywhere along that pattern. Even if they vary their routes, you're going to find they typically leave the same driveway every morning and drive to the same parking lot. So the most important thing you can do to guard your personal security is to be very aware and protective of your own pattern of life. That's what we mean when we say vary routes and times.
It's a good point. Even if you're changing up your route to and from work, there's going to be certain spots that are going to be fixed. Like, if I'm coming home, I can vary up parts of my route, but at some point, I'm still going to have to hit the freeway. And at some point, I'm still going to have to, get off the freeway in the same general direction of where I'm going, right? There's going to be some choke points. And those are especially good places to pay attention to what's going on around you.
This is a big deal with the Navy. I'm not a Navy guy, but it's a big ocean. But there's certain areas where the ocean actually gets really, really small. Like if I need to get my boat from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, there's only really one place I can do that. It's called the Panama Canal. That's called a choke point. And so picture that in terms of your daily routine, and that'll help keep you out of trouble. That also means that as you go through your pattern of life, take a look around and notice the good spots for an ambush. Where are you most isolated? Where can someone set up on you out of sight? Is there some spot where you're especially channeled? The secret to getting off the X is to not stand there in the first place. So it's story time with Jim. This one time, I was in Israel with a traveling companion, and we wanted to check out Jerusalem, the old town of Jerusalem. Turns out Jerusalem is a contested area, and not a good place to be if you don't know your way around. Not a good place to be if you're in a high risk job, which both my companion and I were at the time. And so I study the map because I want to know my way around, and we get there and I get horribly lost.
Real quick, so for maps, for those for the young crowd that's looking at it, the thing that you have on your phone, they used to have in paper form. Go ahead.
That's a real thing. Yeah. So I tried to memorize the map before I even showed up, right? That wasn't going to happen. We end up in town. We've got a really tight timeline because we want to get out of town before, things got weird later in the day. And we're walking around, and I get horribly lost. And I'm like, I got to look down at the map. And I don't want to be that tourist who's sitting there looking down at a map because it paints you as a easy victim. And sure enough, a guy shows up. And he's like, oh, you're American? And I'm like,
get off me, fool.
Get off me. And he's like, no, don't be rude. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to be rude.
Huge warning sign, by the way, which I'm sure Jim is keenly aware of. But for anyone else that's listening, sorry, I got to sidetrack this for a second.
Yeah.
In the book, The Gift of Fear, it's written by Gavin DeBecker. We've linked to it before. It's on our website. If you go to tacticaltangents.com/reading, you can see a list of recommended books. This one in particular, The Gift of Fear, talks about a case where this lady is going to her apartment, and she's coming back from the grocery store, and she's got groceries. She's going back to her apartment building. She's taking the elevator, and there's a guy in there that kind of makes her feel uneasy. And he kind of, there's a little bit of small talk, and then she's getting off at her floor, and he's like, well, here, let me help you with your groceries. And she's like, no, I'm good. And he's like, no, don't be too proud. And she gives in, and she lets the guy help with her groceries. You see where this is going. He takes the groceries back to her apartment, and then, basically holes up in there with her and kidnaps her and rapes her. And she's able to eventually, something like several times. I don't remember it's been a while since I've read the book, but he rapes her several times over the course of several hours. She's 100% certain that he's going to kill her. And she gets out through like the window or the fire escape or whatever. But looking back on it, she's like, first of all, something was weird to begin with. When I first got in the elevator, something about that guy just wasn't right. It just seemed weird that there was someone waiting there. And then the other big warning signal there was his use of that tactic that you're talking about. Don't be too proud. Don't be too rude to turn down the help. And that was exactly what he used to
shaming and shaping.
Yep.
So this goes on for quite some time, and we end up having a kind of negotiation back and forth with the guy. And he actually grabs me by the hand and starts leading me down an alley. And I'm
That's how fools get choked.
I need to find an adult. This is not okay. And
stranger danger.
Yeah. And for reasons that escape me, we ended up following the guy. And my traveling companion wanted to, because she didn't want to make a scene, among other things. And so the old town of Jerusalem is set up like a maze. It is really, truly set up like a maze, and it's blind corner, dark alley, blind corner, dark alley, whole bunch of Palestinians, blind corner, dark alley, and then like place where Jesus walked, other place where Jesus walked. And I don't want to minimize that, but you know, in the 30-second spiel, that's walking around Jerusalem. And I decide pretty quickly, if I just blindly follow this guy, I'm going to end up with my head cut off. So I want to take the initiative back, and I don't want to just bolt. I probably should have just bolted, but you know, there were some other considerations that I had to worry about. And so I start talking to him. I start kind of pressing him for information. And one of the things that I did while we were doing this is I pushed my traveling companion kind of away from me. And that's tricky because human nature made her want to be right up next to me. And I didn't want that. I wanted us to be hard to surround. I wanted us to be hard to flank. And so I kind of made sure she was as far from me as she would let me get away with pushing her. So I start pressing on this guy and asking him questions. You know, we start playing 10,000 questions with Jim, and which is my favorite game. And it became pretty clear pretty fast that this is his shtick. This is his daily routine, is hustling tourists. And he's a tour guide. And for a mere X hundred, you know, Israeli shekels or US dollars, that's what he was doing. And so he was leading us around, and he actually ended up giving us a pretty good tour, but I was never comfortable. And I became keenly aware of the fact that I was following him down a path, and so learn from my mistakes.
Well, and it's not necessarily that that's a mistake. The idea is, you know, your awareness goes up if that's happening. I mean, especially in a place like that. You know, I've never been there, but I've been to a couple other major international cities. Bangkok, Rome, and there's constantly people that are trying to sell you stuff. I mean, it's just, they're doing the same sorts of things, and their intent might not be negative. They're genuinely trying to earn business, you know, or whatever. But you don't want to give that away for free necessarily. If you're going to start following somebody, then that's, like you said, it's a time to start pressing. It's a time to start paying attention. It's the time to start thinking about exit strategies and things like that. And as soon as something gets weird, be ready for that. I have a story that's kind of related. I know these didn't end up being ambushes, but the point of this episode is to hopefully help you recognize one that could be coming. And we had a car. We were in Italy. We were driving around the countryside in Tuscany, so away from any major towns, and our car broke down. We had to get towed. We got a hold of the rental company. They were able to get us a tow truck that took us to a shop. And the shop was going to try to fix the car. And if they couldn't fix the car, then they were going to send us a taxi to take back to, you know, the nearest airport or wherever to get us a new rental car. Well, here was the problem. By the time we made it to the shop, it was about 6:45. In the airport, the rental car desk at the nearest airport closed at 7, and it was like 20 minutes away. And they're like, yeah, we'll send you a taxi. We're like, we're not going to make it. So one of the guys that was at the shop, and this part of Italy, the countryside here, there was not a lot of English. The one guy that happened to be at the shop, his friend worked there, spoke really good English, and he offered us a ride. And so our options were be stranded in this weird town that we can't get around and don't really know where anything is, or accept the ride from this dude. And so we agreed to take the ride, and it worked out. And he was a nice guy. I tried to give him money for gas. He wouldn't take it. You know, we had a good conversation, but the whole time I'm looking for things in his car to stab him with when things get weird. And at one point we came to a fork in the road where it said the airport was left and he went right or something like that. Different direction than the sign. And
I had that happen in Mexico.
In my head, like, I'm like,
it's starting.
Oh yeah. You know, shit's about to get real. And, you know, so my alert level was pretty much through the roof, even though, you know, this guy was genuinely just trying to help us out. But, you know, that's a time to start thinking about tucking and rolling out the out the passenger door if you have to, you know. So it's not to say that everything is going to be an attack, but you want to be in that mode of thinking about what your options are and how this might happen, right?
Were you with a traveling companion?
I was with my wife, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Did that complicate your solution a little bit?
Absolutely. And and we've, because I'm me, we talk at length about what some of our options are going to be and things that are going to happen and stuff. I'm sure you're the same way.
We do have daily counter ambush training in my household.
Yeah,
yes.
She's seen the PowerPoint, so no. But like, you have to be in that problem solving mode, and that doesn't mean it's going to solve or prevent all of your problems, but it's better than just being caught completely off guard, right? So this is a good point. Don't stand on the X in the first place. You want to be able to go through your different levels of situational awareness in case you got to kick it into gear. And so if you find yourself in a position like Jim did, or the scenario that I had, and you accept that there's some unknowns here that I can't answer, it just means that it's worthy of some more skepticism. And that's a good thing. It doesn't mean that you have to go crazy. It doesn't mean that you can't entertain, someone who's trying to help you out, or, trying to earn your business or whatever. You just have to think about plans and options. So let's look at another example. And this is another example that's coming out from that came from John, Active Self-Protection. But let's say you're driving down a residential street in like your Range Rover, and someone decides to kind of cut you off, and they're blocking you in, and they jump out and they try to carjack you, right? They pass you on one side of your car, they angle their car so that you're sort of blocked, then they jump out, they approach you, and they're trying to steal your car. Now, in this video that we have, and this is a guy in Brazil, the car that blocks in the Range Rover is not doing a very good job. He kind of angles his car partway across the road, but if the guy in the Range Rover was paying attention, which, if I remember correctly, I watched a bunch of these videos. I'm trying to keep them all straight, but this guy's able to just kind of keep going and go straight, if he wanted to. I don't think he did that. I think he gave up the car and let him go. But the point is, they made an attempt to try to block this guy in, and he could have gotten away if he had just realized what was happening and hit the gas and driven through. This is an important factor because being quote unquote trapped or quote unquote blocked in, right? How good of a job they did. Remember, we talked about how some ambushes are better than others. It could be hasty, it could be deliberate, it could be well executed versus not so much. So if you realize that someone is starting to block you in, that might be a good opportunity to go, uh-oh, this is weird, and get off the X, get out of the kill box, right? It's that cognitive awareness. As soon as you realize that something is getting weird,
I don't want to be here. I don't want to be blocked in.
Yep.
F this.
You've got to have kind of your not finger on the trigger per se, but definitely your finger along the frame, ready to pull that trigger at a moment's notice. And how we get there is that cognitive awareness. It's that what gets us in trouble is that little bit of a delay when someone gets in front of us and they're kind of blocking us in, and you're thinking, what the F is this guy doing? And the next thing you know, you have a gun in your face, right? The sooner that you realize that this guy is getting in your way, and instead of going, what the F is this guy doing, you go, uh-oh, and you hit the gas, the less likely you are to fall victim to that kind of attack. So in terms of counter ambushes, that's one of the things that we talk about. One way that ambushes sometimes are categorized as near versus far. And if it's a far ambush, sometimes your best option is to break contact. So when we talk about getting out of the kill box or getting off the X, what we mean is, I'm willing to have this fight, but right here and right now is maybe not the right time to have it.
Run like a jackrabbit.
Exactly.
That's an option.
Yep. So
one thing on that. So say they are blocking you in and they're going to start shooting at you. You've probably been taught your whole life not to bang your car into any other cars.
Yeah.
My personal experience is not that way. I have banged plenty of other cars, but at some point you have to say, you know what? This car's going to get banged up. I'm gonna ram this other car if that's what's going to get me out of this situation.
And that's part of the, again, we talked about level of awareness, right? If you think, okay, this looks kind of strange, is this guy just trying to get in front of me in my lane because he needs to turn into a driveway and he's just being a jerk, being impatient, versus this looks like it's the beginning of an attack. how good of a job they did at trying to isolate or trap you has to also be weighed with your willingness in that situation, knowing what you know to get out. Maybe you're not willing to ram another car. Maybe you're not willing to jump a curb or smash a mailbox to get off the X, but you might have to. So you have to kind of be ready for that. So the lesson here in these examples that we've talked about so far, if you can avoid it, don't be in a bad spot. And in a lot of ways, if you have the opportunity to break contact, get off the X, get out of the kill zone, you're probably better off. Remember that the premise of an ambush is to attack you with surprise and from a position of advantage. That means that that's probably not a good time and a place to put up a fight. If you're able to get out of there, leave it. That's an important, I think, ego thing for people to accept, is that if I'm surrounded by a bunch of, a bad guy and a bunch of his buddies, I'm not likely to win that fight. So I'm going to probably run for it. Okay. So that is kind of the goal.
And you're doing everything you can to recognize stuff early, right? And recognize at least, hey, I'm standing on an X right now. I don't like that I'm on this X. Hey, I can't help but notice I don't have any exits where I am, or I don't have any place I can go in this traffic to get away from somebody. So there's a fundamental here in ambush, and a lot of the funny little spy tricks you see people do in movies, I don't know, Born Identity or Born Supremacy or whatever, James Bond, the things like you don't stand with your back to the door, or you don't sit in a restaurant with your back to the door. This is where it comes from, is you don't want to be surprised, right? You want to keep an eye on the exits in a restaurant or in wherever room you're in, because you want to have a couple different ways to get out of that situation quickly.
So, and one thing to think about is the Marine Corps manual, Jim, I think talks about the difference between mounted and dismounted. I think you were the one that told me that. And
Yep.
I think something worth thinking about is if you find yourself in a position where someone is starting to block me in maybe somehow, but I'm not willing to, like I said, take out a mailbox or granny crossing the road, which, by the way, granny crossing the road could be their
Part of the ambush.
That could be their time of opportunity, right? That they're waiting for something like that to happen. But, if you're not willing to do that, then maybe dismounting, getting out of your car, right? I mean, to me, the idea of potentially ramming through some stuff and hopping a curb, not a big deal. Some people might not be at that point, depending on the situation. Hell, I might not be at that point, depending on the situation. But if you think that it's starting to get weird and you're not right there yet, your better option might be to go ahead and just get out of the car, right? And now at least you have a little bit more mobility. You have some flexibility that you're not gonna destroy a bunch of property to get out of there, or take out the granny crossing the road, right? Another big one is footwear. If part of your counter ambush plan is getting off the X and running over to that cool truck gun AK pistol, that's not going to do you a whole lot of good if you're schmobbing around in your flip-flops. So so having some footwear that you can run and fight in is probably a good way to be able to, GTFO, get the F out, right? So think about in your equipment considerations, when you're like, this is my counter ambush kit, I put my AK in my truck with my rifle, my plate carrier and 16 extra magazines. Well, that's cool, but again, in your flip-flops, it's not going to help you out a whole lot. So let's get into one of the other fundamentals, and it has to do, we've kind of talked about the situational awareness thing, but I want to talk about initiative, and this is kind of the surprise element of these types of attacks. And we're going to go over two here because they're contrasting examples. And again, thanks to John for these. The first one is one out of Houston. And there's video footage of this that I cannot describe to you in audio format in a way that would do it justice. You have to go watch the video. But basically, there's the victim. This is a purse snatching. The victim pulls into a parking lot, into a parking spot, and she's getting out of her car. And while she's doing this, the bad guy is doing like a 68-point Austin Powers turn to get in just the right spot so that when he opens his driver's door and steps out, it puts him right next to where the victim and her driver's door is going to be. And so you can see him kind of stalling and taking his time and getting in just the right spot. which to me is a red flag. If I, again, what the F is this guy doing, right?
Well, on the other hand, it could be me trying to park because that's just how I park, judgy.
Well, yeah, it could be. And again, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna come out guns blazing, but it might mean, maybe I lock the door and, clear leather or something, right? So I don't use a leather holster, but the expression what I'm getting at is pulling my gun out of my holster, right?
Yeah.
But mental readiness, it's that curiosity. What the F is this guy doing, right? A little bit of skepticism. Maybe he just can't park, or it's the beginning of an ambush. So this guy does his 68-point turn, and right as she starts to get out of the car, he's in just the right spot, jumps out, grabs the purse, jumps back in his car, drives away. It takes a fraction of a second. It happens that quick. That situational awareness, that's an almost impossible attack to defend against if you don't see that guy coming. Because by the time you're stepping out of the car, he's already in a full sprint, right? To contrast that story, there's another video that will link for you. And it's a guy in South Africa, and these dudes, he's getting out of his car, it looks like maybe in front of a house or something.
Weird things happen in South Africa. That's something you should know.
Weird things.
Weird things. That is a sporty country sometimes.
One of my coworkers was just there for a while for a trip, and the pictures looked awesome. I want to go.
It's very pretty. Sporty things happen there.
Yeah. Well, adventure is out there. But so it shows this guy, he's getting out of the car, and there's a couple dudes, another car pulls up next to him, and a couple dudes jump out with guns. And he's kind of just walking away from his car. It looks like maybe up to a gate or something. And right as they're getting out and going up to the gate, he sees this car stop kind of abruptly. The dudes get out of the car, and he immediately just, he runs to the other side of his car using some cover and concealment, gets his gun out of a holster. There's an exchange of gunfire, and all the bad guys collectively decide to go ahead and vacate the premises at that point. They take off running. One of the guys gets left behind as the car is driving down the road, so he's trying to run and catch up to the car. It's righteous. But again, the fact that dude was paying attention, and as soon as he saw something get weird, he responded to it instead of sitting there going, what's going on? He reacted, right? He went on offense, and so he regained the initiative and sent the bad guys running. So this is where we talk about this idea that action is faster than reaction, and the sooner that you can start shaping the events so that the bad guy has to react to you instead of the other way around, the better. So you have to be quick on it, right?
And you'll find it usually doesn't take much. Most bad guys, the types who are employing an ambush tactic to begin with, will typically only want to play if they still feel like they have all the advantages. As soon as you respond off their script by fighting or getting off their X, they will tend to back the hell off.
There's a convenience store in town that was getting robbed all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the clerk he just started telling him no. They're like, give me all the money. And he's like, no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, bye. They'd leave. Wow, you're not very committed. So situational awareness is a tough thing to teach because we see so many examples of these situations where it's well, if you were paying more attention, you could have prevented that. Well, how paranoid do you walk around, on a day-to-day basis, right?
I walk around in condition magenta 24/7, 365. Okay, thanks, bro. Yeah.
Get out of here. That's exhausting, first of all. And two, it's also not productive, right? Part of the key to that flexibility that we're always talking about here is that agility, that being able to turn it on and turn it off. The way I like to think about it is we should always be curious and ask yourself the questions. If that guy is telling me don't be rude, why? He's trying to convince me to do something, right? Again, going back to gift of fear, he says that charming is a verb, not a trait. So if someone is trying to charm you, that's an action. It's not that they are charming, right? That takes deliberate effort. So you have to be curious and ask yourself those questions. And the kinds of stuff that we're thinking about or we're talking about in this episode, like if things get weird, where's my cover? Where's my concealment? Where are the choke points? Where are the funnels? Remember to get off the X. What's that guy doing? Oh, he's wearing a ski mask. That's if you're constantly curious and asking yourself those questions,
that's weird in Phoenix in July.
Yeah.
I should probably do something about
Right.
that. Yeah.
I think that curiosity is kind of where it stands, where it lends well to situational awareness, asking yourself those questions. When I was still in patrol, and I still am kind of on patrol, so I still do this, but I made it a habit when I was training new officers in patrol, when we were getting out of the car on a call, is as soon as we got out of the car, I wanted them to start pointing out pieces of cover. So if we start taking bullets as we're getting out of the car, what things near us are going to stop bullets? Okay, that tree over there is a maybe, that car is a maybe, you know. And just thinking about those things and refreshing those files on where you're going to run and move to, I think starts to get you in that curious mindset that is situational awareness, right?
True. All right, it's story time again. This is the Jim FBI shirt story. So there I was. Corpus Christi, Texas. It was a fun time. Had a lot of fun there. I was in flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt at Walmart. I went to go buy some bullets because I was shooting all the time. It was a good time. So I had 2 sacks of bullets, like, you know, the 100-round bricks of bullets, 9mm or 45, whatever they were. As it happens...
What's you said it's an FBI shirt story? Is that what you called it?
We're getting to that. So I'm mostly interested in the bullets right now. So I have these bullets, but as is typical for being concealed carrier, I don't have a gun on me. I just have these bullets.
Perfect.
So yeah, so I'm in my flip-flops and my cargo shorts and my t-shirt. And this t-shirt, it was just some grungy t-shirt that I got on a trip to DC. They've got like trailers where they sell t-shirts out of them, and I got one that said FBI on it. I thought that was funny. And so I'm wearing that one. Whatever, no big deal, because it's cool. Whatever. So I'm walking through the parking lot, and a guy walks up to me in the parking lot. It's broad daylight, and he starts this spiel. It's kind of a standard hustle spiel of, hey, man, I need some money for gas. My family's in the car. We're just trying to get down to the next town over, Kingsville. Can you help me out? And I'm pretty directive, and I'm a 6 foot tall white dude who looks vaguely military, and I'm like,
vaguely,
no, yeah,
well, Air
quite
Force,
military.
so
I got the bad haircut and everything, and so I tell him no and kind of back off, and he keeps not backing off. In fact, I notice that he keeps kind of getting closer and closer into my space, and at some point I figure out what he's doing is he's trying to get me to move back, and that's when I got real paranoid real fast on the guy. And so he's trying to get me in between 2 cars, and I'm not going to go there. And I don't know. My biggest concern was that he was trying to distract me while some bro came up behind me and bashed me in the head. That was my biggest concern at that moment. And so I kind of squared off with him. And my plan was I was going to beat him over the head with my bag of bullets. And so when I square off and I take kind of a stance with him, he reads my t-shirt. He's like, FBI? And I'm like, yeah, what do you need? And he bolted like a bunny rabbit. So it's a stupid self-defense story, but it really did happen.
You mean you didn't go like Mulder and Scully on him? Like
I did not go Agent Smecker on him from Boondock Saints, sadly.
So the lesson in this is paying attention is exhausting, and we have to come up with a way to train ourselves to do that. And I think our natural curiosity is the right way, is to not let those things that catch your attention go unspoken for. So if something gets your attention, start asking yourself what that means. Don't just dismiss it. The minute you just go, oh, that guy's doing X, Y, and Z, that's weird, and then you just let it go, you're not giving that due credit, right? Remember back to the gift of fear example that they talked about in the elevator, where the girl got in the elevator and said something about him just seemed weird. And if I remember correctly, when the author of the book debriefed this with this lady after the fact, she said, I think it was weird because the elevator had just come down to the first floor where he would have theoretically gotten off. Why would he have gone back up? Maybe that just stood out to her. And one of the things that he said in response in the book to that is, your intuition's always right in at least 2 important ways, right? We've talked about this before. It's always in response to something, and it has your best interest at heart. That natural curiosity, I think, is the key to situational awareness. Asking yourself those questions, the what ifs, the what's that guy doing, that kind of stuff. And then if something does start to get sideways, think about getting the initiative back, right? And generally, you're going to want to do that if it is an attack with overwhelming and effective fire. Go on offense hard, because you know if this is the nature of that style of attack, a classic ambush type of case, and you can't get away from it, that you're in a disadvantage. So you have to come back at them hard. There's a good example of this, and it's my favorite one. It's the bingo. This grandmother's coming back from bingo at 2:00 in the morning. So you know she's gangster. She's out partying at the bingo hall until 2 a.m.
Granny doesn't F around.
Yeah. She's at the club. So she comes back, she parks in a carport, and it looks to me in the video, it's like black and white footage. Again, another one from John. We'll have the links to it. And she's walking up to what looks to me like a mobile home. She's going up the little steps to the front door, and some guy sneaks around the far side of her car and comes up and tries to, I don't know what his intent was, if he was trying to get in the house or just take her purse or take her car. I've seen a lot of carjackings happen in carports and driveways. But Grandma has a knife, as far as I can tell, like already in her hand, and just goes nuts on the guy and chases him away. It's awesome. She's spicy. So, so you have to think about that overwhelming force and fire, right? If you have to go on offense, you got to go all in, right? And remember the difference between a near and a far ambush. What are those distances, right? How far is far? How far is near? If
exactly 2.3 meters.
Obviously.
Wait.
Oh, so not 21
not
feet?
That, clearly.
21 feet.
Oh, damn. I just got 21 footed.
So in that case where, you're at your front door and dude comes up behind you, can you run away at that point? Probably not. And so you're probably going to have to assault through it. Think near ambush, assault through it. A far ambush, if you have the ability to break contact and get out of there, then maybe that's your best bet. So if you can get away, that doesn't mean that you have to, again, let the guy go or not engage in a fight if you think that, if you need to defend your honor or whatever, but maybe don't do it on those terms, right? Don't fall into their kill zone, into their trap. What else? One thing that I want to talk about, and it's not necessarily related to one of the characteristics of an ambush, but it kind of is, and I'll tell you why, is carrying a gun in your purse. If you are a female and you carry a purse, or if you're a dude and you
or a male, it's 2018.
Yeah,
don't judge
you
me.
carry a satchel, whatever, your fanny pack, it's cool. It's not
a
really
European
cool.
shoulder bag.
It's not really cool, but if that's you, then you do you. And the same can be said true about carrying in an ankle holster, for that matter. Carrying a gun in that kind of place. Think about concealed carry and self-defense in these ambush-style attacks. If you get robbed in the street and you're caught off guard, how much time do you have to respond with that overwhelming force to get the initiative back, to assault through the ambush, right? Digging through your purse or opening up your bag and zippers and, your chapstick and all this stuff, probably not going to be fast enough. If you have to respond with overwhelming force, you need to use your heaviest and your most effective weapon. And your most effective weapon might not end up being the gun that's in your purse. It might just be, stabbing the guy in the eyes with your fingertips, if that's all you got. But it has to be overwhelming.
I like it.
Yeah. It has to be overwhelming, right? And or swinging your box of bullets at him.
That's
I
right.
guess that's, since Jim doesn't carry a gun in Texas, apparently.
Clearly. Well, I figured there were enough other people in Texas with a gun. I wouldn't need one.
Yeah. So those are some of the things that you got to think about, is how effective you're going to be. If you carry a little pocket gun, right? Your little single stack, 6-round 9mm, and you've got to respond with overwhelming force. Real quick, you're going to run out of ammo, right? And I'm not saying that you need to carry a 30-round mag in your back pocket. I'm just saying, think about how you're going to respond. Knives, if you're going to carry a knife for self-defense, you need to learn how to use it and make sure that you're carrying something that's built for that purpose. Just a couple little things. And then the last one is medical supplies. How are you going to cope with after the attack, right? Remember that you're going to be at a disadvantage in these kinds of attacks. You're going to get wounded. It's not a big deal. You can fix it, but you're going to want to be equipped for that. So I want to look back to the list of options from the Army and kind of the big three goals. The Army says you're going to immediately return fire, occupy cover, move out of the kill zone, find the bad guys, fire and maneuver to destroy them. That is the Army doctrine, right?
Yeah. So for me, this is less about the checklist and more about understanding you've got three basic options. Mike and I talk a lot about principle versus procedure. Now, it's up to you to figure out your procedure, but the three principles here are respond with overwhelming force, assault your way through it, get out of the kill zone or get off the X, whatever phrase you want to use, or get help from outside. And we've kind of not addressed that much because it just takes too long. One of the things I've learned from combat is there's nothing quick about a quick reaction force. And when someone is assaulting you in a parking lot, the 8 minutes it will take for 911 to get help to you is just too long. But you do want to have some option, some way of getting help from outside. Now, Mike, one thing I wanted to hit on, we have talked about a number of videos throughout this, and not everyone is super into the technology and super into the podcast apps. Can you talk us through how to get to these videos that we're talking about?
So in whatever medium you're using to listen to the podcast, if it's the iTunes or the Apple Podcast app, when you look down at the screen, there should be a Show More button, and you should be able to look at the links right in there. Now, iTunes in particular limits how many characters I can put in that field, so the links are not usually in there, but there should be an episode webpage button. Every episode that we put out has somewhere in it the link to that episode. If you go to our website, tacticaltangents.com, you can also find it there under podcasts. You'll find this episode, and all of the videos should be available on the website. But in whatever app you're using, if you don't see it in the notes that are right there along with the episode, then find the link to this particular show, and you should be able to see all the links. That's probably the easiest way.
So don't be rude. Don't be rude. Follow us to our webpage. Yes.
Don't be too proud.
Don't be too proud.
Yeah. So my goal with this episode is we want to talk about ambush and counter ambush, but I don't want you. What I didn't want to do is read to you the Army manual. I don't think that helps.
Oh.
I want these concepts to be something that's relatable in a way that you're going to recognize them when they're happening to you. And so that's why we tried to use the examples that we did. We know that they're not all classic perfect ambush scenarios, and we know that there can be better ones or worse ones and stuff like that, but think about those principles, right? And Jim talked about what your options are. If those apply, then use it. We want to make sure that your index of solutions, right, your orientation, your decision-making has those options ready to go on a moment's notice. That's kind of the goal, okay? As always, you can contact us at info@tacticaltangents.com by email. You can find us on Facebook, and that's all we got for today. We'll have new episodes for you on the 1st and the 15th. Jim, anything else?
That's it. Be safe.
All right. Good talk.